It was one of the most consequential deaths in American history, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, just as the Civil War concluded. Beyond the human tragedy, Lincoln's death was a blow to the post-war Reconstruction movement. The task of rebuilding the South and safeguarding the rights of newly freed enslaved people might have been beyond even Lincoln's political skill, but if he'd survived, Reconstruction would almost certainly have been more successful. The failures of Reconstruction without Lincoln plagued the United States until well into the 20th century. The man directly responsible for Lincoln's death was John Wilkes Booth, but Booth was just one part of an elaborate scheme that at first plotted to kidnap the president, then kill him and his chief officers.
John Wilkes Booth targeted the president, Vice President Andrew Johnson, Secretary of State Seward, and General Ulysses Grant.
Booth was the only member of the group to kill his targets, and he likely broke his leg as he fled Ford's Theater. Over 1,000 men joined the manhunt for Booth, who was surprised when public opinion, even in the South, and even some of his co-conspirators turned against him. John Wilkes Booth didn't have a death wish. In fact, he tried to escape into Southern territory after assassinating Lincoln. But in the event escape proved impossible, he was determined to not face trial and execution. Shortly before the assassination, Booth wrote in his diary, "I have too great a soul to die like a criminal."
Sic semper tyrannis! The South shall be free!
But die like a criminal he did. Not long after the assassination, Booth was cornered in a tobacco barn. He tried to save himself by challenging his pursuers to an honorable duel, but the soldiers refused and set the barn on fire. Still, Booth refused to shoot them or himself. He fled from the barn, took a bullet in the neck, and was dead within a few hours, ending his chapter in the history of the Civil War. His body, however, was the subject of a lengthy postscript. Booth's co-conspirators met less theatrical ends. All of them were brought before the courts, and except for Confederate spy John Surratt, all were convicted. 3 of the conspirators would be pardoned by President Andrew Johnson in 1869, but 4 were executed by hanging in July 1865 at Washington, D.C.'s old penitentiary. It was here that Booth was initially buried. In fact, he beat his comrades to the graveyard. After his body was identified and autopsied, it was secretly interred on the penitentiary grounds before the hangings took place. The bodies of Booth and his co-conspirators remained there for about 2 years before being exhumed and reburied in a penitentiary warehouse. In the meantime, Secretary of Defense Edwin Stanton exercised firm control over images of John Wilkes Booth's dead body, determined as he was to deny Booth martyrdom. The secrecy and the sensationalism of Booth's actions inspired a rush of conspiracy theories. One claimed that Booth and his co-conspirators hired an impersonator to die in his place, while Booth escaped and fled to Europe. But dead he was, and his body remained within the grounds of Washington, D.C.'s old penitentiary until 1869. That year, President Johnson agreed to return Wilkes' body to his family. His mother brought his remains to Baltimore, where he'd grown up. The family had a plot in the city's Greenmount Cemetery.
The body was brought to Greenmount on February 18, 1869, and interred in February or March of that year.
Under the circumstances, Booth's relatives felt it inappropriate to give him a headstone, let alone a massive obelisk like that which marks the grave of his father. But the Booth family plot holds one small unmarked grave, which is widely believed to belong to their notorious son. Visitors to Greenmount sometimes leave pennies bearing Lincoln's likeness on the grave or on Booth's father's stone. But it isn't known for certain that Booth's remains lie in the unmarked grave. It may be the final resting place of his sister, so the myth of Booth's escape lingers on.
What if I told you that after murdering President Abraham Lincoln, the most famous assassin in American history lived for 40 more years?
Historians and even members of the Booth family have long sought to exhume the remains for study and identification to no avail. The most recent request was denied in 2013.